I never thought my life would unravel the way it did, all because of the woman who was supposed to be family. From the outside, my story might sound like one of those TV dramas people binge late at night, but for me, it was my reality. And it started the day I walked into the Jefferson family's home for the very first time. I was 26, young, hopeful, and madly in love with Daniel, the man I thought was my soulmate. We had met in college, bonded over late-night study sessions and cheap pizza, and I truly believed we were building a future worth fighting for. When he proposed, I said yes, without hesitation. But little did I know, saying yes to him meant tying myself to his family, especially his mother, Margaret. Margaret Jefferson was the kind of woman who could walk into a room and make you feel 2 inches tall without saying a word. She had this way of looking at me like I was dirt under her shoes, like I'd stolen something that was rightfully hers. From day one, she never thought I was good enough for Daniel. I came from a middle-class background, worked as a school teacher, and my parents weren't wealthy or influential. Margaret, on the other hand, came from old money. Her husband had been a successful attorney before he passed away, and she carried herself like she was the queen of our small town in Kentucky. The first time I visited their estate after Daniel and I got engaged, I felt completely out of place. Their house was massive, with white columns and a perfectly manicured lawn that screamed money. Margaret greeted me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes and immediately commented on my dress. "Oh, that's cute," she said, dragging out the word cute like it was an insult. I brushed it off, telling myself she just needed time to warm up to me. But as weeks turned into months, her attitude didn't change. It only got worse. The wedding planning was a nightmare. Margaret wanted everything her way, down to the flowers, the colors, even the guest list. She treated me like I was just a placeholder bride, not the woman marrying her son. I remember one argument vividly. I had chosen a simple but elegant lace gown, and she sneered when she saw me in it. "Daniel's wife should wear something more impressive," she muttered loud enough for everyone in the boutique to hear. Daniel tried to defend me, but he was weak when it came to his mother. She had this hold over him, and whenever she disapproved of something, he would fold like a cheap suit. I told myself I could handle it. After all, I wasn't marrying Margaret. I was marrying Daniel. But I was wrong. Margaret was part of the package deal, and she made sure I never forgot it. After we married, Daniel and I moved into a cozy house just 10 minutes from Margaret's estate. I wanted us to start fresh, build a life on our own, but Margaret treated our house like it was an extension of hers. She would show up unannounced, criticizing how I decorated, how I cooked, even how I folded the laundry. "Daniel likes his shirts done this way," she'd snap, yanking clothes out of my hands. I bit my tongue so many times, I swear I have scars on it. The breaking point, though, wasn't the comments or the meddling. It was how she treated my daughter, Lily. Lily wasn't biologically mine. She was my adopted daughter, a beautiful little girl with curly brown hair and the brightest smile you've ever seen. I adopted her when she was just a baby, long before I met Daniel. To me, she was my world, my heart, my everything. But to Margaret, she was nothing. She made it clear from the very beginning that she didn't see Lily as part of the Jefferson family. She never called her her granddaughter, never included her in family photos, and openly compared her to Daniel's niece, who she adored. One Thanksgiving, Margaret set the table with place cards for everyone, except Lily. My little girl was 7 at the time, old enough to notice, and she whispered to me with tears in her eyes, "Mommy, did she forget me?" My heart shattered. I scribbled Lily's name on a napkin and placed it next to mine, but the damage was done. Margaret just smiled smugly across the table, like she'd won some kind of sick game. Daniel saw all of this, yet he never truly stood up for us. He would say things like, "That's just how Mom is," or "She'll come around eventually." But she never did. If anything, she grew bolder in her cruelty. The incident that changed everything happened on a Sunday afternoon. Daniel and I had been invited to Margaret's estate for a family gathering. I was hesitant to go, but Daniel insisted, promising he'd keep an eye on things. We brought Lily along, and at first, it seemed like just another awkward Jefferson event, people sipping wine, Margaret parading around like royalty. I went to help in the kitchen for a while, assuming Lily was safe with the rest of the family. When I came back out, my heart stopped. Lily was gone. Panic surged through me as I searched the massive house and yard, calling her name, my voice cracking with fear. It wasn't until nearly 3 hours later that I found her, sitting alone on the back porch steps, shivering and crying. They had left her out there, forgotten her, while the rest of the family laughed and dined inside. 3 hours. My daughter was abandoned by the very people who were supposed to treat her like family. I looked at Margaret, my fury boiling over, and she just shrugged. "She'll toughen up," she said coldly, as if leaving a child outside alone was no big deal. Something inside me broke that day. I realized I could never trust these people, not with Lily, not with my heart, not with my life. I gathered Lily in my arms, kissed her tear-streaked face, and whispered, "We're leaving." And I didn't just mean Margaret's estate, I meant everything. That was the day I decided I was done. I didn't even wait for Daniel to catch up that night. I strapped Lily into the back seat, started the car, and drove away from that mansion like the place was on fire. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might explode. Lily sniffled softly behind me, and I kept glancing at her through the rearview mirror, promising myself that she would never be treated like that again. Not by Margaret. Not by anyone. When Daniel finally came home hours later, he looked torn between anger and guilt. He tried to explain, to excuse what had happened, but his words fell flat. "They didn't mean to forget her," he said weakly, sitting on the edge of our bed. "You know how chaotic those gatherings get." I snapped. Chaotic? Daniel, they left a 7-year-old child outside alone for 3 hours. What if she had wandered off? What if something happened to her? Don't you get it? Your family doesn't see her as family. And if you can't stand up for her, then you're no better than they are. For the first time in our marriage, I saw him speechless. He opened his mouth, closed it, then buried his face in his hands. But I didn't care. Something had shifted inside me that night. I realized I had been tolerating Margaret's cruelty for too long, sacrificing my own happiness and Lily's well-being just to keep the peace. But peace at the expense of my child? Never again. The following weeks were tense. Daniel walked on eggshells around me, trying to convince me to move past it. Margaret, on the other hand, doubled down. She sent passive-aggressive messages, hinting that I was being dramatic. At church, she even told mutual friends that I was overly sensitive and not cut out to be part of the Jefferson family. My blood boiled every time I heard her lies. That's when the idea of revenge started creeping into my mind. At first, it was just a whisper, leave and never look back. But the more I thought about it, the more I wanted her to feel the weight of everything she had put me through. She thrived on control, on appearances, on her perfect reputation. And if there was one thing Margaret Jefferson couldn't stand, it was looking weak in front of others. So I started planning. First, I stopped playing the obedient daughter-in-law. No more answering her calls, no more showing up at her house, no more entertaining her fake niceties. I poured my energy into Lily and my career. I picked up extra shifts at the school, joined the PTA, and made new friends, people who valued me, not my last name. Slowly, my world became less about Margaret and more about us. Then came the second step, financial independence. Daniel and I had joint accounts, but I quietly started funneling my own paycheck into a separate savings account, money Margaret didn't know about. It wasn't much at first, but I was determined. Every dollar was a brick in the wall I was building between us and her toxic grasp. Meanwhile, Margaret kept pressing Daniel to get his wife under control. She couldn't stand that she no longer had her claws in me. One evening, she even showed up at our house uninvited, her voice dripping with disdain. "You're tearing this family apart, Emily," she spat, her eyes flicking to Lily, who was coloring at the kitchen table. "And dragging that child along with you. Daniel deserves better." That was it. The final straw. I stood tall, my voice steady even though my insides were trembling. "You're right, Margaret. Daniel does deserve better. And so do I. That's why we're done." Her eyes widened, confusion flashing across her face. For once, The queen of the Jefferson estate didn't know what to say. I turned my back on her, walked to Lily, and kissed the top of her head. "Pack a bag, sweetheart," I whispered. "We're going on an adventure." That night, I took Lily and left. Not just the house, not just Daniel, but the entire Jefferson family. I filed for separation the next day, and with the savings I had squirreled away, I rented a small but cozy apartment across town. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours, and for the first time in years, I felt free. Daniel tried to fight it. He begged me to reconsider, promised things would change, even cried. But I had made up my mind. Love wasn't enough if he couldn't protect the one person who meant the world to me. And as for Margaret, she fumed. She couldn't stand that I had slipped out of her control, that I had dared to walk away from the Jefferson name. But I wasn't finished with her yet. You see, revenge doesn't always come in the form of shouting matches or dramatic confrontations. Sometimes, the sweetest revenge is simply living well, showing the person who tried to break you that you're thriving without them. And that's exactly what I set out to do. Life without the Jeffersons was like learning to breathe fresh air after years of suffocating. Our apartment was tiny compared to Daniel's family estate, but every inch of it was filled with peace. Lily had her own little room with glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling, and every night I'd tuck her in, grateful that she was finally safe from Margaret's cruelty. For the first time, she laughed freely, without looking over her shoulder to see who might be judging her. That laughter became my fuel. At first, people whispered. Neighbors, church folks, even co-workers, all curious about why I had walked away from one of the most respected families in town. Margaret, of course, tried to spin the story. She painted me as unstable, ungrateful, even dangerous. Emily abandoned her husband. She cried to anyone who would listen. But here's the thing about lies. They crumble when the truth shines bright enough. I didn't need to defend myself with words. I let my actions speak. I volunteered at school, joined community projects, and built a network of friends who saw me as more than just someone's wife. I found a strength I didn't know I had. And every time Margaret's name came up, I smiled politely and said, "I wish her well." Nothing made her angrier than my refusal to play her game. Daniel visited a few times, trying to repair the marriage, but something in him had changed. Maybe he realized that without his mother's approval, he had no backbone. He would sit on my couch, staring at Lily coloring on the floor, tears in his eyes, and whisper, "I miss us." I wanted to believe him, but deep down, I knew he wasn't ready to choose me over his mother. And I wasn't willing to gamble Lily's happiness on a man who couldn't stand tall for her. That's when Margaret made her biggest mistake. She tried to fight for custody. Can you believe it? That woman, who once refused to even call Lily her granddaughter, suddenly claimed I was unfit to raise her. She marched into court with her expensive lawyers, spinning tales about me being unstable, selfish, and reckless. But what she didn't count on was my preparation. I had every teacher, every neighbor, and even my boss testify about the loving, stable home I had created. Lily's pediatrician spoke about her health and happiness since leaving the Jefferson estate. And when the judge asked Lily directly where she wanted to live, her sweet little voice cut through the courtroom like a bell. "I want to stay with my mom. She makes me feel safe." Margaret's face turned scarlet. Daniel looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. And me? I held my daughter's hand, proud and unshaken. The judge ruled in my favor, granting me full custody. Margaret stormed out of that courtroom like a thundercloud, but I knew the damage was done. Her reputation had cracked, her lies exposed in front of the very community she had spent decades manipulating. But I didn't stop there. I took the Jefferson name, the one she thought gave her all her power, and I turned it into her weakness. I started a support group for single mothers in town, many of whom had been dismissed or looked down upon by families like hers. We met weekly, shared resources, and lifted each other up. Slowly, my little apartment became a hub of strength and resilience. And people noticed. Reporters caught wind of our group, and soon, local news stations were featuring stories about mothers reclaiming their power. And every time my face appeared on TV, Margaret's blood must have boiled hotter. She wanted me erased, forgotten. Instead, I was becoming a symbol of independence right in her backyard. One night, months later, I ran into her at the grocery store. She was alone, her cart half empty, her eyes tired. For the first time, she didn't look like the powerful matriarch who had terrorized me. She looked small. She glared at me, but I just smiled, my daughter's hand in mine, our basket full of food for the week. "Emily," she sneered, her voice weak. "You think you've won, but this isn't over." I leaned closer, my voice calm but firm. "It was over the moment you left a little girl outside in the cold.
You just didn't know it yet."
Then I walked away, my heels clicking on the tile, Lily skipping beside me. And in that moment, I realized my revenge wasn't about destroying Margaret. It was about proving that she could never destroy me. The years that followed were nothing short of transformative. Lily grew stronger, more confident, her laughter filling every corner of our home. She thrived at school, made friends, and never again had to question whether she was wanted. And me? I found a peace I once thought impossible. I rebuilt my life from ashes, not just for myself, but for the little girl who trusted me to protect her when no one else would. Margaret faded into the background. Her social circle shrank, her influence crumbled, and her carefully constructed mask cracked beyond repair. The Jefferson estate, once buzzing with parties and prestige, became a hollow place, a reminder of everything she lost because of her own cruelty. People stopped seeing her as the queen of the community. They saw her as bitter, alone, and irrelevant. The last time I heard her name was at a town charity event. Someone whispered, "That's Margaret Jefferson, isn't it? Shame what happened to her family." And I realized then that my revenge had been complete. Not with fire, not with rage, but with silence. She had destroyed herself, and all I had to do was step out of her shadow.
Daniel?
He eventually remarried, but his eyes never quite lit up the way they used to when he looked at me. I think he realized too late what he'd lost. Not just me, but the family we could have been if he'd chosen love over control. I don't hate him anymore. I just feel nothing. And that nothing is freedom. One evening, as Lily and I watched the sunset from our porch, she leaned against me and said, "Mom, do you ever wish things were different?" I thought about it for a moment, then smiled.
No, sweetheart.
Because if things had been different, we might not be here right now just like this. And that was the truth. Every heartbreak, every betrayal, every lonely night, it had all led us to this moment of peace, of love, of unshakable bond between mother and daughter. That was the revenge Margaret never saw coming, not her destruction, but our survival. So to anyone listening right now, maybe you're dealing with someone who underestimates you, belittles you, or tries to control your life. Remember this. You don't have to fight them on their battlefield. Sometimes the sweetest revenge is simply walking away, choosing yourself, and building a life so strong that their absence becomes irrelevant. And if this story touched you, don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more powerful stories, and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Because sometimes the best way to get even is to live well.